Well, hello, folks. Welcome to the Currency Recap. Joe with you here. It is the 20th of February, Thursday, as we approach the end of the month and the weekend, more importantly for me. I've got my 2 cents. You guys know how this works. Take responsibility for the outcome. Let's get into the meaningful news of the day. Let's take a look at what's been moving. And if I've got some trades, I'm going to share them with you. You bet.
Disclaimer. This video was created for professional Forex and crypto traders. Maverick Currencies is a proprietary trading firm that employs professional traders around the world. Our traders trade firm capital and keep 70 to 80% of profits they generate. All trades and analysis in this video are for professional traders only. If you are interested in becoming a professional Forex and currency trader for Maverick, click the apply button in the video description. Let's break down what happened today.
As we move into the market analysis, folks, you'll see that we had kind of more of the same. A little bit of weakness, obviously, on the dollar based on what we've seen in the equity markets. They're starting to tie themselves together, I've noticed. So we'll see here. So anyways, the U.S. equity markets moved lower after the S&P and the Q set a new high yesterday. Ankit may mention that as well. I mean, it was a good push to the upside. Everything looks pretty good. And then a little bit of a corrective action. Now, where the chart ended, you're going to see it here in a second. It's still super bullish. It's still in a very, very strong pattern. However, the U.S. dollar slid pretty quick. Now, the yen itself continues its move higher, and I've got a couple things we'll talk about as we get into that and take a look at it. Another about 0.5%. So it's been on a pretty good move over the last week and a half. It could simply be based on a currency that's stable, and that's kind of my projection. I should say that's kind of what I've been noticing. Anything that's stable seems to be a little bit more relevant than anything outperforming or underperforming. So how do we finish? Well, yen was again up about 0.5%, or up again at 0.5%, over 0.5% today. Dollar slid 0.85%, pretty good drop. Lots of worries when it comes to policy changes. I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. Franc, euro, pound, everything sideways. Aussie, Kiwi. Kiwi's showing a little bit more strength. The Kiwi actually cut interest rates, right? But it did what it was expected to do. It had a pretty tumultuous day yesterday. Ankit showed you that, but it actually came back to clear itself flat, and it's starting to creep higher. Moving over to some more market performance there. We got the S&P down today, 0.43%. The world index down just a bit. Crypto down about the same as the S&P. Gold up slightly, and oil up a little bit as well. Moving over to the cryptos, you can see Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum up a little bit, but then Litecoin down. Let's get into how we finished overall. So I got my market outlook as a plus 2.5. It was at a plus 3 when I did the currency, I should say, excuse me, folks, the equity markets yesterday. And it's because I had that confirmed candle to the upside, confirming an ascending triangle breakout. So real quick, let's take a look at that chart. And this is what I'm talking about. The expectations of an ascending triangle breakout, one of my favorite patterns, it came to fruition. Now, the volume didn't really increase or decrease, but it's there. I would expect this candle. This is exactly what I expect. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we came back and tried to retest that 20-day. What I did like, let me get rid of my scratches there. What I did like was the shadow here. Take a look at that. This is where we closed yesterday. This is where we opened. So we gapped down, traded much lower, but came back to, retrace the majority of it. So any sort of shadow or tail just shows the price action kind of pushing higher. Now, it doesn't mean it's guaranteed or anything, but it does keep me a little bit glass half full, which is why, I got to, instead of going from a plus 3, I wanted to be fair and say, a plus 2.5 might make people happy. But it is definitely a super bullish pattern. Let's get into some of the economic news, and this has been the kind of the push-pull or the idea of, hey, how can I get ahead of some of these currencies? How can I see what's going to be strong or weak? So we took a look at the CAD here, and we had a little bit of an increase in the CPI. Now, the CAD hasn't done much past just kind of slip. Now, there was a little bit of a blip there, but it just kind of rolled over. We'll get to that chart in a second. Another one that was pretty solid was the Kiwi here. Expected to cut, and they absolutely did. They're in line. They feel comfortable, and it's the stability, I believe, of the Kiwi that kept it up, because it did go down, but then it came right back up. I'll show you that chart as well. The pound, the CPI, this really didn't have too much effect on it as well. We had unemployment claims on the US dollar. And once again, folks, that is a tiny little move to the upside. The way the dollar moved today, I don't really get it. I truly think that there's just some reaction, some worries, and some uncertainty, but we'll take a look at the chart as well. So what do we got left? Well, we got a bunch of stuff here. Manufacturing PMI, core retail sales in the CAD side. The U.S. doesn't have much manufacturing and services PMI, but I don't think there's going to be too much past today that's really going to impact any sort of currency specifically. I just want to see, I'm very interested to see how they react to each other as we finish the week. So let's get into the currency analysis. It's really not giving us a lot, but it's actually really not taking anything away either. First off, I like to start off with the yen. I'm just going to go straight up on the velocity score here, folks. And this is what I'm saying. I mean, this move that I've seen over the last little bit here has just been pretty interesting. So it's moved higher, it's stabilized, and it's pushed up. This was a really good push to the upside. And if the dollar itself is a little bit unstable or slipping, well, guess what? Maybe the yen's the place to go. Okay, that's speculation. But once again, it is definitely outperforming and it's doing pretty well. I'm just going to continue to follow this. If this can stay here, I'm totally comfortable and fine pairing it against some weaker currencies. Moving over to the dollar, check it out. There you go. I mean, completely moving sideways and it just rolled right over. A little bit of instability when it comes to either the worries moving forward. Now, the equity markets themselves played themselves out pretty good. They actually climbed back to finish pretty much flat or slightly higher. In fact, the S&P and the QQQ set new highs. Today, a little bit of reluctance here, at least in the dollar. Now, let's take a look at the franc. Completely sideways, kind of flat. Not really much change from the previous day, kind of meandering around and kind of sitting back and watching. I see the same thing going on with the euro. The euro's been on a little bit of a slide versus the pound. I'll get there in a second. But I do like a little bit of a bounce here. I'm going to kind of take a little bit off of it when it comes to its outlook. But it looks to me like more of an oversold bounce or a bear rally, right? We're coming down, a little bit of a rally here. I'd expect maybe the next couple of days, set some sort of a reversal signal and then roll back over. So I'm going to still keep it kind of glass half empty. Now the pound is looking a little bit more optimistic. It still has that slide, but it is definitely up in an upside channel. What I mean by that, folks, is it's still consolidating, moving higher. It's definitely off of its low here. Now, the RSI itself is kind of meandering around that 50, so kind of a zero would make more sense to me. I'd be a little bit more comfortable keeping it there, but I don't really want to give it too much weakness because it seems to be pretty stable. And that's kind of where I'm looking. Let's jump over to the CAD here. Now, the CAD's pretty obvious. This actually spilled over as well, kind of with the dollar. I'm not sure if this is more worries about some of the policies that are coming out. We're coming up to that deadline, but it was an absolute spillover here. Rollover on the SR, obviously. The RSI is lower. The moving average is lower. It's an easy -3. It's been struggling for quite a bit. Now, these are reactionary, folks. Remember, these can bounce pretty quick. In fact, we got a little bit of a green candle since we're talking, but it's the overall momentum that I'm after, and it's more of the stability in the currency than the strength or weakness of the currency for me personally right now. Let's move over to the Aussie. Check this out. A little bit stronger than I thought it would be, but I like it. Kind of a high base. I'm going to give it a little bit of a glass half full here. What I like about it is the RSI is flattening above that 50. The SARs are going back and forth. That's fine, but we have this slight increase here on the moving average. What I look for, folks, and you know me, it's all about price action. You know, all the secondary indicators are called secondary indicators for a reason. Is if I can get this price action to move based on any sort of news or against a currency that's actually slipping, the Aussie would be something to actually put forward, at least on the bull side there. And then let's take a look at the Kiwi. And the Kiwi had its little push-pull, its reaction to cutting interest rates, but it's the stability. You think it would cut interest rates, it would stay lower and continue lower, but it came right back up. We've got an RSI that's above the 50. It's kind of sideways. I'm going to give it a sideways moving average with a flip on the SAR, so I'm okay giving it a +1. Now, what I'm looking for on both the risk-on currencies, the Aussie and the Kiwi, is that break above those levels. Now, if these things can emerge and shoot higher and we get a little bit of a surge or a little bit more weakness in, let's say, the dollar and even the yen, if it decides to pull back, these could be something a little bit more stable to pair against. So let's move over to the cryptos. Here is a Bitcoin, and it's looking pretty good. It's an emerger. It's moving higher. It's going to be interesting because the first three are going to look good, and then Litecoin's not. But Litecoin is actually in a pullback more so than falling apart. So these are trying to work their way back. I don't like it when something gets this low and tries to get all the way up at first. But I'm going to keep this pretty much. I got to give it a +2, and the reason being is because the SARs are up, the RSI is up, and it looks like it's trying to break above that resistance. But personally, folks, I don't like how it came from the bottom all the way up there. But it is a +2. Now, when you move to BCH, it's a little bit more weak, right? We got to flip on the SAR. We're kind of sideways here on the RSI when it comes to where it's at, right around that 50. But this moving average actually is starting to flatline. The best I could give this was a 0. In fact, I was debating giving it a -1 because this could consolidate here and then roll back down. But where it's at, as far as momentum goes, and that's what we're doing here, is a 0 for now. Ethereum's a little bit stronger. It still has that kind of sideways above the 50 here on the RSI, but it does have a slightly sloping moving average and a flip on the SAR. I do like some of the area of price action that it's actually testing. So if this can continue this sideways move, I'm totally fine keeping it. I'm going to give it a 0, but you could definitely give it a +1. I'm totally fine with that as well. And the last one is Litecoin, right? So Litecoin down 4.7%, 75%. It's just a pullback. Now, overall, the chart itself is a little bit more bullish than you'd think, right? The SAR did flip, but it is a pullback coming off of a resistance level in an overall uptrend. Now, the moving average is hard to gauge, and the RSI is slightly lower, but it is moving higher. So I decided to keep this at a 0 for now. But if I can get confirmation above maybe a couple of these candles here and this moving average, I'm totally fine with the target at the upside. And I could easily switch that gear from a 0 up to a +1, +2. So possible trades, folks. I truly don't have any. But you know what? I'll take the time. Let's go out and see if I can't take a look at a couple that might be interesting. But right now, I'm just not really into it until I see some sort of stability. So starting with the obvious, you'd think you'd pair, hey, let's take a look at the US dollar, Japanese yen. Dollar's going down, yen's going up. It's just a little bit oversold. What I'm worried about is the bounce probability. And the yen, as stable as it is, I would rather pair it with something a little bit less volatile. And I think that's the biggest problem I have with the US dollar right now. If we can continue to exploit the US dollar's weakness, I'm fine with the pound. I think the pound is one of my more stable currencies. I like this one. I wouldn't be opposed to maybe a trade on the pound against the US dollar, at least in the shorter term, right? You guys know how to do this. Keep it on the velocity side of things, target appropriately, and make sure that you do take profits at targets. US compared to the franc, you can see that it's absolutely rolling back down as well. I just don't believe in the stability of the franc as much as I do the pound, so I'd rather do the pound US if I was going to do a pairing against the US. Other than that, guys, I mean, that's kind of all I'm looking at. I like the stability in the yen, but I just want to see what it does over the weekend. So this has been a pretty difficult class for me because the reaction that I saw today in the US dollar kind of really shook things up. But the consistency and the strength of the yen could be something to use. So that's pretty much all I got, folks. It's really difficult. The US dollar is a little bit more reactionary, and I don't like that. And I see the yen kind of moving a little bit higher, and I really think that the corrective action this week is across pretty much everything, right? But the yen moving higher, I have to just kind of put it on the fact that the US is a little bit more tumultuous than people like. And seeing something more consistent is probably better than something stronger or weaker. So I'm seeing the New Zealand dollar, the Aussie dollar, the pound. I'm seeing things like that kind of stabilize. Now the CAD's got some problems with it because of the policy worries, the US dollar's back and forth. So there's not a lot out there that I really, really like. So if you can find something that kind of works, go for it. But understand it's going to be a little bit shorter term. We're still in a very reactionary mode. And I don't know if we're going to get there until we start to see some finite policies that come out of the US side. As always, folks, just play relative strength and weakness, proper position sizing. Understand that if you're playing velocity, you can make trades and they could be pretty decent. Just make sure that you don't try to overextend them. Take what you can when you can. Make sure that you're adjusting and following your proper position sizing is probably the most important there. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining me. We'll talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.